Hello, everybody. This is Mary Davidson, one of your co hosts. And in today's episode, we are going to be chatting all about managing maker markets and vendor relationships with Sarah Frost. This was a really fun episode for Logan and I to record because we learned so much. And so we hope that you do as well. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hi, friend. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Logan Clements, and I'm joined by fellow co-host Mary Davidson. And this week, we have a very special guest to talk to us about a topic a couple of you listeners have reached out to us about. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary to introduce Sarah.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today. So Sarah is a maker turned maker market host and has a love for small businesses, handmade goods, and the maker community. She's been hosting maker markets in Bothell and the surrounding North End communities in the Pacific Northwest since 2021. In addition to hosting markets and festivals, she's also committed to providing resources and education to the micro handmade business community. And we are really excited to learn more about this today. Logan and I we don't know a lot. And so we're so excited to have you, Sarah. Thank you for taking the time and for being here.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Thanks so much. Glad to
come. Is there anything else that you want to add to your bio that we didn't cover so listeners can get to know you a little bit better?
No, I feel like that was good. That was great.
Yeah, and a little bit more about why we asked Sarah. We actually got connected through Piper, who was one of our past BepCon speakers in 2024 back in Tacoma. And we got to have a virtual call together. And I feel like I realized it was like, Sarah needs to be on the pod. And then we had people asking about festivals and markets. And I was like, Sarah definitely needs to be on the pod. So I'm just really happy that we're able to have you here and just want to jump into the discussion. So we like to start broad on this podcast. So I'd love if you could tell us how you define maker markets. And you're going to hear me use makers markets and maker market interchangeably. And I apologize, listeners. But Sarah, how would you define it?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to start, because it's a maker market, it's a maker's market, it's kind of whatever you want. Historically, they've also been called craft fairs or craft shows. You'll hear that a lot in the community of makers and artisans that I work with. I love the term maker market because it indicates that somebody is making a craft in terms of an actual honing of one's craft, as opposed to a craft fair, which can sometimes feel like, oh, we brought our crafts that we made with our kiddos or maybe our grandma or something, and it has a little bit of a different connotation. Maker market to me has people who are professionals. They're professionals at what they do, whether they're making jewelry or pottery or art. They have spent time honing and developing this craft. They are excellent at what they do, and they are there to showcase their businesses, as opposed to the craft fair, where maybe it's a hobby or you're trying something out and it's a great way to connect with your neighbors and your fellow people. There's nothing wrong with a craft fair at all. But I do think there is a distinction in the level of product quality, and also just the type of variety that you may get, as opposed to what you would see at like a craft fair or a bazaar. And this too is different than maybe a farmer's market, where you might see some of those people who have a craft and bring their amazing products, but you'll also see farmers and food vendors and such. The biggest difference between a farmer's market and a maker market, while there are lots of overlap, is that I don't have farmers typically. I will occasionally have a flower farmer, but not typically an actual produce food growing farmer. And the people who tend to shop at a farmer's market are the folks who are going to get their groceries and maybe some soap or some other stuff that's more of a impulse buy, less of I'm going to come shop this event to purchase that handmade mug I've been eyeing, or to get that vintage clothing that has been mended and repurposed by this incredible maker. That's sort of the difference there for me too.
Thank you. That's super helpful. And for anyone that's less, familiar with these maker markets, this is like a really large question, but can you kind of walk us through what goes into organizing one?
Yeah, it's A lot like hosting probably events that you're familiar with, where you have to select a location, whether you're working with maybe a venue, or for me, I work with a lot of cities and jurisdictions and use public property. So I get to deal with permitting with the cities and making sure I have the right amount of restrooms and garbage cans available for use. That's the really glorious part. And then working with vendors. So we set up applications well in advance. People apply. They are then juried so that we have a good curated feel for the event, and we don't have 50 of the same type of product, but we have a nice diversity of both skill level, price point, style, aesthetic, as well as product types. And then we run the event. So there's tons of marketing in between. That was a very, very pared down version of that. But you basically run the event start to finish, and it'll take anywhere from 8 weeks on the very, very short rushed end to more like 16 for a full-fledged, I'm using my hands, which y'all can't see, for a full-fledged sort of panel of events. So I tend to run sort of cookie cutter events where I host the same event in the same place multiple times a year, but with different vendors each time. And that has worked really well for me. And then I sort of pick up my little cookie cutter event and move it somewhere else so that we're not reinventing the wheel every single time. But I also host festivals, which are another little bit of a different thing. And those tend to have more of a theme as opposed to being a more generalized event. This past year, I hosted 2 events in Mount Lake Terrace. One was a festival called Get Sauced, and it is a hot sauce and more festival. So very specific clientele, very specific vendor types, very specific vibes. And then later that year, we hosted one with the Mount Lake Terrace Chamber of Commerce called Wagfest, which is all about those tail loving, tail having. You can roll with me on that, and maybe, but dogs, pets, geez, woo. But it was a pet festival, so we had hundreds of dogs, and we worked with another local business called Dogget, and they're amazing, and they also connected us with like the Seattle Kennel Club and stuff. So again, very curated, both in the attendees as well as the vendors that we were working with.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It's helpful to hear, but also I'm like, oh my gosh, you do a lot. I can't imagine all of the things that go into that. So thank you for sharing that, and lots of similarities, with other events, but still quite their own beast, it sounds like. So we know, and you mentioned that you work closely with artists and small business owners. So what would you say that you've learned about managing vendors who are really deeply invested in what they're selling?
Vendors come from all different walks of life and all different skill level, and some of them I'm meeting at the very beginning of their journey, and some of them I'm meeting well later into the time that they are fully professional doing this all the time, full time. Maybe they have a shop, whatever. It depends on the vendor, but regardless, I try and be kind because it's so personal. Every maker that I work with is doing something deeply personal to them, whether it's a hobby that they found during COVID that they just poured their heart and soul into, or art that they found that has been very healing for their mental or emotional health or their physical body. These are the whole inherent process of working with a maker or an artist is that they are doing it for the love of doing it, not because they're like, this is going to be the next great moneymaker, because I can tell you it's not. A lot of them are side hustlers. A lot of them have 9-to-5s or families that they're trying to take care of and support. And I think managing the vendors, I think one of my superpowers is that I can meet them where they are, because I've been a vendor. I've been a maker. I've made a product, albeit mine probably wasn't with my whole heart because ADHD, hello hobby, but I think that I understand what it's like to be a vendor. And one of the things that I really try and do with my events is make the vendor feel seen. I'm sure that you all know with festivals and working with many, many attendees or many groups that it sometimes becomes a game of numbers. And this is vendor number 22, and this is vendor number 35, and you're in booth number 62. And that can get really draining over time, where you're like, I'm just going to roll up into this event, and who even cares if I'm here, and who cares how I'm doing? And that's really the part that I try and manage very differently. I want to make sure that vendors feel seen and appreciated, because I don't have an event without awesome vendors. I don't have one. If I don't have vendors coming, I don't have anything to host. So for me, that relationship is primary. That is the whole point of this. And without these incredible people, I have nothing.
I think that's so important, and it really applies for other event folks listening to this, even if they don't do makers markets. Like, what are some examples of how you make those vendors feel seen? Is it like you're making sure you stop by their booth at some point if you can, or what other tidbits do you have for us?
Yeah. I One of the things I do is that I rotate vendors out a lot. So I'm never picking my besties. I have lots of vendor friends, but they don't get a guaranteed spot just because we're, kosher with each other, that we're closer or whatever. Everyone is treated the same in that way. I do make a point to stop by every single booth every single time. And if you're not in your booth when I, roll around, I try and come back by later. It doesn't always happen, but I'm not perfect. And then I have been doing a thing for a while. I fell a little bit off the wagon this last year, but since I started, I would do a vendor gift. So every event that you attended with me, you get a gift for being there. It is essentially sort of worked into that little bit of wiggle room that you have with every event, so that I get to give back something special. Sometimes it's as simple as bringing a cart of snacks around and saying, pick some snacks, take some. I know you want some. Bottle of water, here you go. Sometimes it's been as custom as an ornament for a holiday market that I made myself. It's not fancy, but it's a little something that says, I appreciate you, I see you, you're here. And I write their name on the bag so they know that it's like I spent time doing it to make them feel special. But I'll respond to just about every email that somebody sends me. Might not be quickly, but like I'll get there. And they just need to know that they're not just a number. Every single vendor gets a marketing post from me, individual marketing post. So they really get highlighted in a number of different ways.
That's awesome. And I love that sometimes it is the simplest things, but it's just reminding themselves and yourself that we're all people and we're working this event together. So here's a snack, or something else. But
Yeah.
yeah, it can be simple, and I love that. I was thinking this is not at all the same level as what you're doing, but a while ago, like I don't know, it was a handful of years ago, I had the opportunity to do some vendor management for this plant lovers like exhibit that took place, and so we were working with a bunch of plant vendors, and it was cool. I'm not like a plant lady myself, so I learned a lot. But through that process, I just found that they had so many questions, and that's fair because they're bringing their businesses to the space, and we want to make sure that they're comfortable and that they have all the information. So you've already touched a little bit on that vendor communication, but could you maybe share some examples on how you do make sure that it's clear and fair and consistent, and like what does that vendor know before you go look like? Just some of those details.
Yeah. One of the things I'm probably most proud of, and this is super nerdy, but I created a vendor portal. So every event gets a vendor portal, and that is a password protected. Like you only get the password if you're the vendor, if you're a vendor at that event. And it lays out everything. So I have vendor FAQs. I've got a map with where you need to go. I've got maps with load in and load out instructions. We have things on there like what to expect from the fire department if you're a cooking food vendor, or that what you need to bring. Here's all the things you need to bring. It lays it all out, and it's all in one place so that they're not having to go find that one email in their messages that came through 6 weeks ago with your acceptance. Where did that go? It's a spot that they can go. All they need to do is remember the password. I trust that if you can vend at an event and you're making your own product, that you can save a password somewhere and bookmark a link. But it's all there anytime they need it. It is available. And that has been an absolute game changer for me. The first couple events I did, I was fielding a question every hour, I swear. And I basically got to the point where I was like, I can't keep doing this. I cannot keep answering all of these one-off questions, especially because half of them are the same. Where can I plop all this information to really make it accessible and clear, and so that everyone is getting exactly the same information? And that vendor portal has worked so well. I have never let it go. I just keep going and change it for whatever it needs to have that may be a little different. But it's been a good place to supplement the email communication with, if something changes, like, hey, inclement weather coming, we're outside, plan ahead, dress warmly or dry, whatever, then that's maybe not something I would put there. That's an email blast, but I'd also put it there. So if you miss the email, it went to your spam or something, that you've got it covered in another place so that you're going to see it.
That is a pro tip, even for, I'm like, I just think of exhibitors at like conferences, you know, that having that one spot, because we know, yes, that email is going to get buried. So that seems like such a great tool. You mentioned this a little bit about how you kind of work with vendors, but how do you balance curating that mix of vendors that you mentioned while still being like, you have your friends, the folks that you've worked with in the past, but maybe also being inclusive of like new and emerging makers?
Yeah, good question. I have a couple ways of doing this. One, I'm very clear up front that just because you get into one market with me does not mean you get into all of them. A lot of people will apply to everything thinking, cool, I got in once. I'm guaranteed the rest of the year. Sorry, friend, you are not. A lot of it, if people are recurring and do come to most events, it's usually because they have a very unique niche or product type that nobody else is really doing. So I work with someone who has speaking of plants, who has a plant mobile, and I don't have a lot of other plant vendors, and I certainly don't have a lot that come. I do have a handful, and they're awesome. They also come, but I don't have a lot of plant trucks. So, if you've been to Bothell, you've seen Arrow's Aim Greenhouse and Supply Co. there quite a bit, because she is a very unique setup, a unique product type, and there's not a ton of competition in that niche. Now, if you're in a more saturated niche like jewelry or pottery even, I try and keep the variety of product type really different. So if you've got a jeweler who does really funky, weird, one-off, everything is one of a kind, and then you've got another one who does very like simple, modern, clean line, minimalist jewelry, and then you've got another one doing fun polymer clay jewelry. Those all speak to different people, but I wouldn't want to have them all the time at every one. I might bring in a different minimalist jewelry the next time or something like that, so that you're really getting a mix of style and type of product every time you come.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting to think about. And I'm not an artistic person. I don't have like skills I feel like I could bring to a maker's market, but part of me is like, oh my gosh, I want to be a part of this. This sounds so fun. So I love hearing what you're sharing. It just sounds like a really good community. But with that in mind, you really have touched on the vendors and how you make sure that they feel supported. But do you have any more examples, just getting into it a little more? We're event planners or professionals listening to this podcast. So when you're on site and at an event and you said you try your best to check in with the vendors, maybe you'll stop by in the best case scenario and say hi to every single person. But can you give any other examples on the things that you're doing to just really make sure that they feel supported?
Mm-hmm. I think having volunteers there to support folks when they need. My phone is available. Let me start there. Everyone who attends one of the events, my phone number is available to them. So if they need something at any point in the day, they can call me or text me, and they're getting me, not somebody else. And then I will work to sort of make whatever they need happen, whether it's a bathroom break and they're by themselves, so they need somebody else to watch their booth so that their product is safe, or they need to go run out and get some food. They didn't pack any today. They need to pop by the food truck. It could take 5 minutes or it could take 25. We've got somebody there who will come and stand in their booth and make sure that everything is taken care of. If they're running late, text me. If you're, arrived super early, text me. It's that availability that I feel like a lot of other event coordinators don't have, or they do, but maybe it's not as clear. One of the things that I've done over the past handful of years, in addition to selling my own products at markets, is that I have sold for other vendors. So I pop in and maybe they're like, hey, I'm double booked this day. Can you sell for me? And so I've worked on the other end of maker markets too as a vendor, and know that it is not always super clear or obvious who the point of contact is on the day of, or as a helper, I don't get told. And so how do you know who to, like, what do I do if I have to go to the bathroom, So I think having that be really available is pretty critical, and having people to cover and help out when it's needed is good. I'll also, I'm on site all day. I'll help you put up your tent if your tent is rickety. I'll be around, walking around to hand out water if you need it. It's kind of all the things, and that level of availability can sometimes be really taxing. So I understand why a lot of event hosts don't do it, or they have like an on-site coordinator who might not know the vendors personally. I get that too. But there is a balance there where you can really speak to those vendors. One of my experiences as a vendor before I started Maker Markets was also that I felt like a number. Like I didn't feel like the coordinators knew who I was or what I made or what my business was, that I was some obscure digital application that happened to show up in person. And I really do try and be intentional in knowing who is there and who you are and who your business is. And that can go a long way. Earlier, there was a note about like diversity in the vendors and how I curate. I forgot to mention too that I also host a scholarship booth. So if you're brand new, one of the things that I will do to support that is if you've participated in 3 or fewer selling events, whether you did a little pop-up at your friend's boutique or you sold at a farmer's market or whatever, if you've done less than 3 of those, you can sign up for the scholarship booth, which waives your booth fees. I provide your tent, your table, your weights, a chair. Anything additional is up to you. And then you get a free consultation with me for an hour. So we can go over how you can best be prepared for the event, especially if you've never really done one before. And that, watching the vendors who I've had as a scholarship recipient, watching them blossom into full-blown vendors, if it ended up being a good fit, because one of the reasons I offer that is so that if it's not a good fit, if they're like, I hate being outside, I don't like selling in person, I'm out, then they can determine that without investing in all those things. But it's been really magical to watch some of those people that I had that one-on-one with, really got to know them, got to see their business thrive, watch them year after year just expand and grow and thrive. And that has been so special. So that's another thing that I will continue to do because it's just really important to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, Mary, but my wheels are turning for like folks that need, again, outside the makers, but applying it to what we do with events of, yeah, what would that scholarship booth look like, or some kind of supported booth, especially with the consultation, because that's the other part is I feel like a lot of folks, if they've never done it before, they'd set up, they'd get whatever result, and maybe they're not happy with it, and they'd just be like, well, maybe it's not for me, versus getting some kind of constructive feedback from somebody who's experienced like you. Would love to know, you've mentioned a couple, and I know we very much made you break it down to the bare bones of of like what it takes to manage a market. But what are some examples of some common challenges you've had on site at these markets, and what have you learned from them?
I have learned a great deal about the difference between public and private property and what what vehicles can or cannot be towed and by whom. So one of the primary places that I pop up are typically like parking lots and streets. And I set out no parking signs. And I'm like, hey, don't park here, please. People don't read no parking signs. But turns out if it's well, maybe I shouldn't give away these secrets. But basically, I have a really hard time getting cars towed. So being able to flex around like, oh, that truck is still parked there and 2 booths were supposed to go there. Where do I put these 2 people now? And how quickly can I pivot this in amongst all the other setting up things to make sure those vendors still have a spot that isn't total garbage? That has been one of them. Also pivoting from people not being able to show up. That can be a real bummer, but obviously I know that it's almost never on purpose. Usually something has happened or someone is sick or whatever. But when you have a gap in your layout, it can feel a little weird. So figuring out how to pivot once you know that information. And then other things like weather. There is just no getting around the weather, let me tell you. Whether it's 95 degrees on pavement and you're all just cooking, or a torrential downpour in March. We experience the full gamut of that here, and being able to make sure to equip vendors with resources on how to set up their booth in such a way that will help them, whether it's tools like shade cloths that go on the inside of your tent to help keep the temperature cooler inside the tent, or those like really funky looking neck fans that honestly life-changing. Having those tools and being able to provide that to the vendors makes it a better experience for them. and in, at the end of the day for me also. But those are two of the biggest sort of pivot moment challenges that you just cannot know until you arrive on site the day of.
Those neck fans are awesome. I've worn one to an event that I did in Florida, and I was like, this is the best decision I've ever made. So, side note, totally agree.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then that our audience is vast in regards to the different types of events that they're involved in. So what would you say what lessons from running markets do you think apply most to other parts of the event industry, like conferences, galas, or other festivals?
I think if you haven't, there's a book called Unreasonable Hospitality. And that book is phenomenal for anybody hosting events. It is not written for event planners. It is not written for that audience at all. It is a man who ran a restaurant, and he went above and beyond to basically serve his customers. That is the very, very short version of it. But what he says is that you need to build in a level of surprise and delight for everything that you do. For me, this is the vendor gifts. For somebody else hosting a conference, maybe it's a conference attendee gift that they didn't know they were getting. A swag bag can mean a lot of things, right? It can be a crummy little bag that's printed with like a bunch of advertising in it, or it can be a really dope bag of actual goodies, or maybe you don't mention it at all, and that's just a little surprise and delight when they show up that, hey, with your name tag you also get this cool thing or something. It probably wouldn't even have to be for all the attendees. It could be for your participants. But I think finding something that's small, it doesn't have to be a big detail, but find that one small thing that can make the experience for your attendees or for your participants or for both that much more special. That surprise and delight moment is going to go a long way in making the whole event feel more special, more unique, more thoughtful. And it doesn't take a ton of time, money, or energy, or it shouldn't. That's the whole kind of point behind that unreasonable hospitality concept.
We are a big fan of Will Guidara over here, so I love that as a applicable tip. If you could give one piece of advice to event professionals working with vendors of any kind, what would it be?
Have patience. Don't even get started if you don't have your patience. I find that there are so many small things that can really bog down the bigger picture of things that you really have to just let some stuff go. One of the things I can think of as an example for that is vendors or anybody who's sending an email and their email handle is not a business name. It's just like, J2501 at Yahoo. And I don't know who that is. And then they sign off. They're like, hey, Sarah, I have this question about this thing. And then they're like, okay, bye. And they don't tell me who they are or what their business is. I mean, you're dealing with small things like that all the time. So pack your patience, know your stuff. And I think set up your values and your guidelines and your boundaries and parameters before you even get started. One of the things for me was that I wanted that scholarship booth. I set that up and built that in from the beginning. Another thing is when I'm accessible and when I'm not. You can have my phone number for a day of the event, but please don't text me before that. Those types of boundaries, if I hadn't set that up ahead of time, would have been really hard to walk back. And so being able to just sort of set up what your system is going to be and what you value so that you don't have to fight for it later or rescind something later is going to be really, really critical.
Now I want to email whatever the email you said was J1215 at Yahoo.
Made it up.
See what they say, Shout out to whoever they are. That's awesome, though.
I just made it up. If that's somebody's email, I'm so sorry. That just came out of my brain.
We're about to get so many emails.
No, that's awesome, though. Super great examples. So thank you so much for sharing all this information. I think it's been really eye-opening for Logan and I, and we hope it has been for the listeners as well. And before you leave us, is there anything else that you want to add that we didn't cover, or can you share where listeners can find you?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that I need to add, except that if you are in the local area of the Pacific Northwest, we will be popping up in downtown Bothell on March 28th for the Making Local Market. So if you want to see and experience one for yourself, please come join us. We will be out there, rain or shine. So no matter the weather, we will be there. Come shop and support these small businesses. But you can find me at makinglocal.com, Instagram, Making Local and at Making Local Markets. A little bit of a different content on each, but if you want to follow the markets, follow the Making Local Markets. And then Facebook and Pinterest and all the other places under Making Local.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for being here. And we hope to learn more from you again in the future.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
And Mary, I have the bonus tip this week, so I will roll right into it. This week's bonus tip is if you have cameras that are at your event for recording purposes, or maybe you're showing that lovely iMag image magnification on the screen, make sure you have chairs for your camera operators, especially if your event is more than just like an hour or two long. The number of events I've been working recently where the camera operators don't have chairs. And I then got to ask them at one point and they said, it's normal. We always get forgotten. So they need it to be specifically bar stool height because they're usually standing to operate, and just having a nice high chair they can sit on to rest between sessions is just going to help you get better recordings and get better camera shots. So save your camera people's feet and give them a stool.
Logan, great bonus tip. Also, I just learned that's what iMag stands for. I actually have had no idea. I've just had iMag for years. So double bonus tip. Love it. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can email us at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can also connect with all of us today on LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you. And if you want more Better Events content, you can join our private community on Substack. But with that, thank you so much for listening to another episode, and we will be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.